Anyway, you might have heard, according to what uncritical liberals are saying, that 600,000 people have already died because of Trump withdrawing from USAID. And I looked into these claims, and as you might expect, these numbers are just totally made up. I made a video on my main channel a while ago called How Economists Just Make Stuff Up. And I went over how a lot of these sorts of figures are just straight up made up based on vibes or conjectures and don't have any real basis in evidence that exists in reality. This video right here, How Economists Just Make Stuff Up, on the main Bad Bernardo channel. You can check that out if you want a broader expansion of what's happening and what I'm about to talk about, how and why it happens, and how you can protect yourself from believing it. But this is what's happening with these USAID death figures. The way that it works with these sorts of figures is that neoliberals, which is the ideology of the people who sort of make these numbers up and those who spread them, like Democratic Party aligned people who are anti-Trump, who are really highly in favor of this sort of so-called soft power imperialism, where you basically make countries dependent on you by giving them a bunch of aid, but basically making basic healthcare, basic food services dependent on you while they loot your resources so that you can't develop those services for yourself. And then you also get to claim that, you're doing them a service, a selfless service by giving them these services, etc. It's a massive win. You bring these countries closer into your sphere of influence. The thing is, Trump doesn't understand this. Trump's like a moron. He's just like, USAID, we're really spending all this money on these third worlders. No. I don't do a good Trump impression, I know. He's just really dumb. He doesn't understand what USAID does for American imperialism, that it's well worth it for American imperialism to do this sort of thing. But the neoliberals do, and they are fucking outraged that Trump did this, but they can't just say, this is bad for our soft power. They want to take a humanistic angle, because that's what the propaganda is. We're spreading freedom and democracy and economic prosperity. So they need the humanitarian angle. So they're taking the humanitarian angle here. And what happens in the media, which the media is mostly, Democrat-aligned neoliberals more than anything else. So in a situation like this, they're going to side with those who are saying this stuff. It's one neoliberal statistician makes up a bunch of numbers based on literally zero actual material evidence. The mainstream media reports on this and reports on it uncritically as fact without even talking about its potential limitations. And then you see this and you believe it. You see a neoliberal citing the article and you see it and you take it at face value, rather than realizing this shit might just be made up. I should look at how they made this up. I should look at where this comes from to see if it's even sensible in the first place. Because when you do that, you see it's not actually based on evidence. It's based on conjecture. So let's look at one of the articles on this to illustrate my point here. It's very important to challenge these sorts of claims at their source. Imagine if someone claimed that 1 million Palestinians died in Gaza without basing that on anyone who has actually died. Not even a conjecture based on actual real deaths that have actually happened. Just a conjecture based entirely on modeling, based on zero initial real-life data even. That's what this data comes from. Here's an article from the New Yorker covering this. It's called very confidently, "The shutdown of USAID has already killed hundreds of thousands." It's not called, "The shutdown of USAID may have already killed hundreds of thousands." It's not called, "The shutdown of USAID has already killed a lot of people," which, could mean 100, could mean 1 million. It's very confidently called, "The shutdown of USAID has definitely 100% already killed hundreds of thousands." So the basis of this claim is modeling by Brooke Nichols, an epidemiologist and mathematical modeler who released the USAID Tracker of Impact. A very not politically neutral thing to do, obviously, in the first place, but according to this, deaths caused per hour because of no more USAID. Importantly, this is making claims regarding how many people have already died, right? So not projections for the amount of people who may die in the future. It's outright claiming that more than 600,000 people have already died. That's a claim that would have to be corroborated by real-world material evidence to have any real basis to it. For example, if you compare this to, say, the Gaza genocide, they have actual real material evidence, counted, named, identified, dead, up to around 70,000 people. And then on top of that, some other people have built projections to say, well, here's what the total number of dead might be, accounting for those who have not been identified, for whom we do not have material evidence of their deaths yet, or who we may not ever have any material evidence of their deaths. So that's one thing. The thing here is, though, this This isn't actually based on that. This is not based on any initial data point of deaths from supposed USAID deprivation, nothing like that. It's based on estimates that, as the methodology here goes over, for example in this case, are based on assumptions of how many people might have died, rather than actual real data on people who have actually died. For example, based on the budget for the 2024 financial year, USAID's nutrition program was allocated $168 million. It's estimated that the cost of treating a child for severe malnutrition, while varied by context, is between $100 and $200, assuming a similar budget of $160 in 2025, that this budget is utilized for the treatment of severe malnutrition in children, and that on average treatment per child costs $150. Approximately 1.1 million children with severe malnutrition would remain untreated as a result of a USAID funding freeze, and this would result in approximately 168,000 deaths. As you can see, there's no initial data point here. There's no initial data point saying, here's the number of people who have factually died from malnutrition as a result of USAID being discontinued. We're building upon that to get a more complete picture. No, it's literally just pure assumptions, pure projections. And these are pure projections as well, that if they were really happening, you would expect there to be tons of dead people for whom there would be ample evidence from which to draw, and not just like a couple of isolated anecdotes that are being subtly linked to potentially USAID, nothing like that. It doesn't even consider like any alternative scenarios, like what if people who got food from USAID simply replaced it with food from other sources? What if not getting food from USAID didn't actually mean that you ended up having severe malnutrition? Because that's what they're assuming here, in that basically every person who is no longer getting $100 to $200 worth of nutrition from USAID is necessarily now, as a result of this, going to be experiencing severe malnutrition. That's a massive fucking assumption, isn't it? And note as well how they assume that the nutrition budget for USAID is purely for medical treatment for severe malnutrition in children. But it's not. That doesn't make any sense. It's just nutrition, general nutrition, not specifically treatment for severe malnutrition. But that's what their modeling is based on. It's estimated that the cost of treating a child for severe malnutrition is between $100 to $200. Why are you assuming that the entire budget for nutrition is purely going to treating children who are already experiencing severe malnutrition? You're making that up. Nutrition obviously encompasses all types of food aid. You know, you give someone who's not actually experiencing malnutrition a sandwich, that counts as nutrition. You're extrapolating quite a bit here to form a projection that, again, is not actually based on any concrete data. So this is clearly a deliberate and very conscious attempt to fudge the numbers. They assumed, knowing fully well that it's not even remotely the case, that the entire USAID nutrition budget is only for people with acute malnutrition. That is for people who are like potentially on the cusp of starvation already. And why did they do that? Because that's obviously going to produce the biggest possible number for your estimate. And they want a big number so that then neoliberal media outlets can take that number and report on it uncritically, as the New Yorker has. So yeah, this is a projection. And the fact that there is not yet any material evidence corroborating this, 600,000 people dying in around 6 months, there should be literal like mountains of corpses. I'm not saying literally every single person who has died should be identified. We need material evidence for every single one. But there should be a lot of material evidence of people who have died as a result of this that should be able to relatively easily be linked to the withdrawal of these services to corroborate this modeling, this projection. But there's not, is there? They're focusing entirely on the projection and providing like a couple of like individual anecdotes rather than material evidence, even remotely, on the sort of scale that you would need to be able to corroborate a massive figure like 600,000 from a projection. I'm not saying that mathematical modeling can't be useful in these sorts of situations, but they need to be based on some sort of initial verifiable data point, like here's verified deaths from this thing specifically, proven to have been caused by this thing specifically, based on like bodies, media reports, autopsies, whatever. Then you can expand from that, and here's the potential number of deaths that might not have been counted, that might be, slipping through the cracks, to get a bigger estimate. People have been doing this with the death toll in Gaza, like, okay, 67,000, there's like the 67,000 reported deaths, confirmed deaths based on actual evidence. And then, they do mathematical modeling saying, based on blah, 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 it's likely that there's maybe 200,000, 300,000 total. Okay, that's an acceptable way of mathematical modeling that is based on actual real evidence. This is not. This is based on, I made up numbers. And then now I'm saying 100% confident this is 100% how many people died. Has no one died as a result of this? No, of course someone has died as a result. Of course people have died as a result of this. Undoubtedly. But the root cause of that is a deprivation. inflicted on these countries in the first place to prevent them from building their own services, their own public services, to combat these issues themselves. The USA made these countries dependent on them for imperial reasons, and that's why the USA has the power to withdraw these services in the first place. But what I am saying is that they have no proof that it's anywhere near as bad as they're saying, and their thesis here is not, look how reliant these countries were on USAID. We should help these countries build up their capacity to fight these issues independently. No, their thesis is, look how reliant these countries were on USAID. We need to make them reliant on USAID again. Now, that's independent of the fact that the data they're using to argue that point is clearly made up. The majority report is going to eat this up, by the way. If anyone's going to eat this up, it's probably the majority report. Just look out for this. I guarantee you, probably in the next week, they're going to make a video uncritically accepting these figures as 100% true with no scrutiny whatsoever. Now, this article intersperses that grand claim, 600,000 deaths, with actual evidence of people suffering and who have died as a result of this. But it's like anecdotes, right? It's like, here's this family who have lost their crucial medical services as a result of this. That's not proof of 600,000 deaths, okay? In terms of actual proof, if you ask these people to say, okay, you claim 600,000 deaths, so let's say there's an undercount of like 100 times fewer, okay? So let's say there's only 6,000 deaths that have been counted accurately, and the actual figure is 600,000. First, I'd like to see you provide us evidence of these 6,000 deaths for which there is actual evidence. I'd like you to show us evidence that these deaths were specifically caused by the withdrawal of these programs. Ask them if they can provide evidence, hard evidence, for even 100th of the deaths that they are claiming happened. They will not be able to. They will not be able to at all. It's not comparable to the modeling for Gaza at all, because the modeling for Gaza is like, there's evidence for 70,000 deaths, and we are estimating there's like 200,000. That's like, okay. We have evidence for like 1 in 3 of the total. This is like, they literally can't provide you with hard evidence for even a remotely like adequate proportion of what their claimed total of the deaths are. It's total bullshit. It's made up garbage. And the way that I've been seeing people arguing against this is maddening. It's like, they're just going straight to the talking point of, well, the USA shouldn't have made them independent on this in the first place. You don't need to argue that, even though it's true, because the data is just made up. It's bullshit. It's a neoliberal professor with a neoliberal agenda making data up, which is then picked up by neoliberal outlets to further a neoliberal agenda, a neoliberal imperialist agenda, trying to argue the case to bring back American soft power for the benefit of Americans through a dishonest framework of arguing that it's actually beneficial for the Africans who would initially deprive healthcare of like local, independent, non-dependent on foreign imperialist countries' healthcare in the first place. They intersperse a limited number of anecdotes here with the grand thesis of the article, which is clearly stated in the title, which is hundreds of thousands. But it doesn't matter how many anecdotes you can point to. You need actual like data, like here's this amount of deaths that are actually proven. And our statistical modeling is expanding upon that to form an estimate of the total number of deaths, accounting for those who may not have been counted in that figure. But there's not even that sort of evidence here, so you should definitely just discard this until they provide that sort of evidence, which they're not going to fucking do, obviously. They have a political agenda to reinstitute American soft power imperialism. Well, this isn't even soft power, this is hard power, really. It's making these countries dependent on you for basic healthcare services. They like that, and they want to reinstitute it once Trump is gone. So it's important that you can test that bullshit at its core, at its root, which is this insane claim that they're making based on no hard data, just someone plugging numbers into a mathematical model and saying, dude, trust me. It's neoliberals making up numbers that are then presented as reality, uncritically accepted as reality by other neoliberals, which then infects your mind unless you're careful. They are literally inventing a reality, and you should discard it out of hand until they provide you actual real hard evidence to make you believe their claims.